All right, we are going to continue with our series of freeCodeCamp and doing the responsive design certificate. And all because of one of you said, hey, keep on going with this. We're going to keep on going on. All right. So we're going to be moving on to this right here, which is, let's go ahead and take a look at it real quick. It says we're going to learn the CSS colors by building a set of colored markers. I don't know what those look like. We'll see for sure. And we're going to be selecting correct colors for the web page. This will greatly improve the aesthetic appeal for your readers. In this course, you'll build a set of colored markers and you'll learn different ways to set colors and color values on how to pair colors up with each other as well. So it looks fun, it looks exciting. It looks like we're going to be 94 steps in this one. And I'm sure it's just going to continue to build upon what we've learned in the previous two modules. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, we are in step one. This little pop-up showed up. This is what we're going to be building, the CSS color markers. And all this is done in CSS. It's not going to be a photo. So it's going to be neat, interesting to see all the stuff that we can do with this. And we even see the little background shadows on it as well. You're actually going to be amazed with what stuff you can actually do with CSS. And I'm going to throw up some images on here while we're taking a little break before we start coding here. But all the images that you see on here, they are done with CSS. It almost looks like it's Photoshop, but it's not. So anyways, let's go ahead and close this out and get into step number one. Okay, so in step number one here, it says that in our previous projects with our web pages, we went ahead and started off with the doc type HTML declaration, followed by the HTML element. And now I feel like freeCodeCamp is forcing us to remember what we did in the first two exercises to help us out with this. So let's go ahead and do this here. We want to do the doc type HTML, and that starts off with doc type and then HTML. Okay, it's a single voided element here. It doesn't get any kind of closing tags whatsoever. And then the next part here, it says make sure you have an HTML element with the lang attribute with the en as its value. So for it, we're going to do HTML. We're going to close that off, and then we're going to revisit the beginning tag here, and we're going to put in here the lang, and we're going to set that equal to en. All right, let's go ahead and check our work, see if it is what it says. Sweet. All right, moving on to the next step. Okay, this is going to be part number two in building a set of colored markers with freeCodeCamp. It says in here, nest the head element with the HTML element just after the head element and add a body element. So a lot of stuff in here, but it's fairly simple here. We're going to do a head. We want to close that off. And then after the head section, it says go ahead and add the body element. So I'm just going to go to the next line here, and we'll do the body, and we'll close off the body here. And just remember, all this stuff needs to happen within the HTML tags that we saw up here on line 2 and the closing tag here on line 5. Of course, we're going to add more stuff in between lines 3 and 4, but let's go ahead and check our code, make sure it works. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next one. All right, so we're in step number 3 of building a set of colored markers with freeCodeCamp, and it wants us to add the title section or the title tag in between the opening and closing part of the head. And it serves us as a little reminder here just to regenerate some of our previous thoughts and previous teachings. It says in here that this title will also serve when the page is opened. Again, we're not going to be able to see that. And then it also helps out with the SEO on knowing what the main topic of this page is all about. So we're just going to do the title here, and then we're going to close it off. And that's the way that I typically teach students, if you haven't been following along with my other lessons, is as soon as we create an opening tag, let's go ahead and close it, right? And so in here, it says we want to put the word colored markers in there. And let's go ahead and see if we got this correct. All right, we're moving on to the next one. All right, so we are on step number 4 of the building a set of colored markers from freeCodeCamp. And we're not going to be really doing anything else in this step that we can actually see, but it says for good measure, go ahead and add a meta tag. And we need to put the meta tags in the head section. And so we're going to go ahead and do a meta. And then it says in here that we want this to have the following in it. We want the char set, the character set here. We want to set that equal to UTF-8. And that way we know that we're utilizing Unicode transformation format that's 8-bit as far as the character encoding. So when someone visits our website, it doesn't look like it's gibberish. Okay. So that's what that part means. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We're ready to move on to the next. All right, so we are on step number 5 and building a set of colored markers with freeCodeCamp. And in this one here, it's going to be talking about adding a meta element to our web page. This belongs in the head section over here. And with that being said, the meta tags, they can be grouped together. That's typically what you see. However, you can put it below the title. It will still work. But as good developers, we want to keep a good practice, and we're just going to group things together here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a meta tag here, and then we'll read the instructions on what needs to go inside here. So visually, we're not going to see anything, but behind the scenes, we're going to add the meta tag. We're going to give this a name attribute. So we're going to do name. We're going to set that equal to viewport. And then the next part here is the content. So the content attribute, we want to set that equal to, and then I'm just going to go ahead and grab this right here. That way I don't misspell anything. And then I'm going to go ahead and paste that in there. Let's go ahead and check the code. There we go. We're going to be on to the next step here. We're on step number 6 now with the building a set of colored markers for freeCodeCamp. And it says on here that in the body, we're going to be starting to actually visually see things now finally. We want to add an H1 element, and we just want to have that title on there, the CSS color markers. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter key here, H1. Again, good practice to go ahead and automatically put the closing tag on there. So that way you can just type in between and not forget the closing tag element. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in here, CSS color markers. And let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're on to the next. All right, we are on step number 7 with freeCodeCamp's building a set of colored markers. And this part here, we're back to the head section where we're going to be adding a link to our style sheet. So it says next to the title here, let's go ahead and add a link element. This looks like that. And then inside here, it says that it needs to have an attribute of the rel, which is the relation. We want to set that equal to styles sheet. And then the href attribute, which means this is where it's going to be pointing to in order to get our CSS page. And it just wants us to put in here styles.css. And that's in reference to up here, the styles CSS. So imagine that these pages are co-located together, all in the same directory, and that's why we don't have to use .. in order to get access to our CSS page. So let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next. So step number 8 with building a set of colored markers for freeCodeCamp, it says now that we have an external CSS file, we can go ahead and start styling the page. As a reminder, we can target a paragraph element and send it to the right in this example here, giving us a little example code. And then down here it says, go ahead and create a new CSS rule that targets the H1 element and sets the text align to center. So it wants us to take this text and center it on the page. So how we're going to go about this is we're just going to do H1 with the curly brackets. And inside here, we want to have the text dash align. And then we want to set that to center. And then we want to make sure that we do put a semicolon in there. If you haven't watched any other videos, every single property and value, we're going to go ahead and make sure that we have semicolons on there, because if we're skipping a semicolon anywhere, it's going to break our code at that point. So please make sure this is a semicolon, not a regular colon. All right. So let's go ahead, check our code. There we go. Congratulations. We're ready to move on. Step number 9 with building a set of colored markers from freeCodeCamp. It tells us that we want to add some more elements on here, but first we need to create a div. We're going to give it class attribute, and then we're going to set that attribute to container. It says make sure that the div is below the H1 element. So very customary to have div elements in there. as well as maybe a div called container that's going to be containing something that is probably not going to be the full width of the browser. Here we're going to just do a div, again, practicing the opening and closing tags so we don't ruin our code or forget anything. And in here, we want to give the class attribute, and we want to assign it the container class. That looks good here. Again, we're not going to see anything visually until we either A, style something, or B, put something in this container. So let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're ready to move on to the next one. Step number 10 of the CSS colored markers for freeCodeCamp. We're looking at adding another div element, and this one has to be inside of the container that we just got done creating. And we want to make the class, give that class attribute the name of marker. So let's go ahead and do another div. And in here, I'm going to do the opening and closing tags just like before. And I want to give the class here the name of marker. Okay. So I'm assuming maybe later on we're going to get one marker that is good to go, and then it's going to be something that would be repeatable for the other markers that we saw on the original. So let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next. All right, step 11 in the colored markers tutorial here with freeCodeCamp. What it's telling us up here, it says it's time to go ahead and add some color to our markers. Remember, one way to add color to the element is utilizing that keyword of the actual color itself. Now, there's lots of pre-made colors that we can reference by name. And if we take a look down here, it wants us to do our very first one with red. But you can use hex code, you can use RGB, lots of ways to color things with CSS to get things just right. And then it gives us a little bit of a reminder here. This is how we target a class. So if we had a div on our original HTML page over here called freeCodeCamp, then we would target it with a period. And as I've said in the previous videos, with CSS, how do you know which one to target as far as, is it a period? Is it a hashtag? Is there no period? And anytime you have a class, I think of grade school, or I think of high school, middle school, where you have periods, right? Classes have periods. And so that's why we want to add that period there to ours. So we just got done making a marker class on our HTML. So here we want to have a marker class indicated with a period here. And then we have the curly brackets. And then inside here it says, make sure you set the background color property to red. So we're going to do background color, and we want to set that to red. Okay. And I think I misspelled background here. So let me go ahead and just highlight this and paste it just to make sure. Here we go. Then let me get rid of it. And now we're not going to see anything because we haven't given it any dimensions quite yet, or we don't have any text inside of that block element that is on our HTML page. We didn't supply it any text. So as of right now, you're not going to see anything. But we're going to go ahead and check our code, and we got the congratulations. Let's move on to the next. All right, step number 12 with freeCodeCamp's building a set of colored markers. It says here that the background color was applied, but since the marker div element has no content in it, which is exactly what I told you, it doesn't have any height by default. So in our CSS rule for the marker, let's go ahead and give the height property 25 pixels. And let's give the width 200 pixels. So let's see what that looks like when we apply it. So let's do height. We're going to set that to 25 pixels. Again, make sure we put our semicolons in there. And then the width, we want to set that to 200 pixels. And you can see that red line is now shrunk down. It almost looks like a marker. And we only did one class so far. So anyways, I feel like we're going to keep building on this. We got the congratulations. We're ready to move on to the next part here. So step 13 with building a set of colored markers with freeCodeCamp, it tells us that the marker would look a lot better if it was centered on a page. Now there's an easy way to do this with the margins and the margin shorthand property, because in the last projects we utilized margin top, margin left. And so margin is a shorthand property that will set margin areas all the same. And I think that as we progress on here, yes, the margin property can set all of them. We can also separate them as well utilizing the margin property itself. But anyways, to center the margin property on this page, let's go ahead and set the margin property to auto. This will put auto on all of the margin positions here. So the top, bottom, left, they will all automatically get the auto. So let's just go ahead and use that margin property here. And then we want auto to have it go all around with a semicolon. And that allowed us to center this element by utilizing margins auto on all 4 sides. So let's go ahead and check our code. There we go. Congratulations. Moving on to the next. All right, we are on step number 14 of CSS color building set of color markers for freeCodeCamp. And it says on here that we want to create 2 more markers with the class of marker. We want to make sure that these are below the original marker that we created. Now, something that I'm always telling students to start visualizing in their mind as they are coding along, because when you're a developer, you're not going to have these guided steps to guide you. And we saw from the original photo that we wanted to have 3 different markers, 3 different colors, and we already have one that is centered. It's red. Let's pause on that part of being able to change the colors. But we want to have these markers stack on top of each other. And this is what we're doing in this step here, is we're going to be creating these markers, and they're going to be stacking on top of each other here. And notice that there's no spaces in between them right now, but it looks like a big block of red. And so eventually what I'm thinking that freeCodeCamp is going to do here for us is maybe we'll have a class just for the background color itself, because having all of these red under the pretense of marker may not be the best thing, because we wanted to have multiple color markers. But they are all centered, and the formatting does not look great on this. However, I'm not too worried about it, because I know that freeCodeCamp is going to clean this up here for me. But I'm going to go ahead and check the code. We got the congratulations, and let's move on to the next so that this looks more like a marker rather than a big block of. We're on step number 15 of the building a set of colored markers with freeCodeCamp, and it says, while we have the 3 separate marker divs, they look like one big rectangle. And that's what I told you in the earlier one. And what we need to do is we need to add some space in between them to make it a little more easier. And so we're still going to utilize the margin property here, but we want to now do 10 pixels and then auto. And let me explain what this does here for us. If we only have 2 properties on here, or 2 values on here, it is going to take this number here to be part of the top and bottom of your element. And this happens to be the left and right. So this would be something like if we were to separate this into their own properties, it'd be margin top 10 pixels, margin bottom 10 pixels, and then margin left auto, margin right auto, and that's what gives us our centered look here. So now we have the 3 bars, or looks like an equal sign here, but that's exactly what we should be seeing here. And let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, it passes. Let's move on to the next. All right, we are on step number 16 of building a set of colored markers with freeCodeCamp, and in here it says, we want to give the markers a different color. You need to add a unique class to each one. And that's kind of what I was alluding to, is that we applied this class called marker to each one of them. But it looks like we are going to create a new class on the element, and it wants us to add the class of 1 to the very first marker. And I'm assuming in the future steps here, we're going to be assigning a class, that class of 1, maybe to a different background color instead of red. And it wants us to recognize here that we are able to add multiple classes as long as we separate those classes with a space. So in this example here, this particular div has a class of animal, and it also has a class of dog. And freeCodeCamp also tells us that when you're utilizing multiple classes, and for example, in this next one, I'm assuming we're going to be adding a color change, maybe. And whatever class is added last that has that duplicated property, that last class wins. It overrides the previous one. So if animal had the background color of red, but dog had the background color of blue, dog would win. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Let's go ahead and complete what it's asking here. And I'm just going to go ahead and type the word 1 on here, and we want to make sure that we have a space. And let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. Let's see what we're going to be doing with this class. All right, step number 17 in Learn CSS Colors by building a set of colored markers. We're looking at removing the background color property from the marker class that we created. So no longer are we needing this background color red. And again, as students learning this stuff, what do you think is going to happen in your mind? If we're lacking the color of red, then in your mind you should be thinking, what's the default color? And that's what's going to take precedence if we don't define it. So if we remove it here, it's totally gone, but our markers are still going to be there as far as division lines because we still have the width, we still have the height, but right now it is simply going back to the default color. So let's go ahead and check our code here. We got the congratulations. Let's move on to the next part. Step number 18 of building a colored set marker with freeCodeCamp. We're looking at now attacking that class that we just got done creating, which is the 1 class. And we want to change that background color to red. So here's the thing that I want you to start thinking about. How do I target that class? Remember, classes have periods. And so we're going to use the .1. Then we want to open up the curly brackets. Next, as we're thinking about this, are all 3 of them going to turn red? Or is just one of them going to turn red? And so hopefully you're thinking, hey, just one of them is going to be turning red. We're going to do that background color here, and we're going to change that to red. And as you can see, the first one showed up because it has that class of 1. All right, let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're on to the next. So this is step number 19 with freeCodeCamp's building a set of colored markers. And now that we have the 1 class all finished, let's go ahead and add 2 and 3 to them. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to make sure that this says 2. And then I'm going to come down to this marker here, and I'm going to put 3. And so I think that's all that they're wanting for this. And then we're going to probably go to the styles.css and apply different colors to each one of these. So congratulations, we're moving on. Right here in step 20 with the building a set of colored markers for freeCodeCamp, it tells us that go ahead and create the CSS targeting the 2 class as well as the 3 class, and make sure that we are separating our classes here. So let's go ahead and do that. It looks like I'm just going to grab this up here with the 1 and I'll apply it here. This one's going to be 2. We don't want the red background. We want this to be green. Perfect. Next is the class of 3, and we want that to be blue. So let's go ahead and change that to blue, and there we go. The markers are coming alive. So let's go ahead and check our code. See if that works. Congratulations. Moving on to the next. Step number 21 with the freeCodeCamp build a set of colored markers. It tells us that there are 2 main color models. We have the RGB, which is red, green, blue. And we also have CMYK, which is the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. For this project, we're going to be utilizing the RGB model. Now, whenever we're using RGB, sometimes you can even add in there another property for transparency. But anyways, it wants us to target the container. Remember, we created a class called container. And so we're going to do this with a container. And then we're going to do the opening closing brackets. So make sure you have a period in there, and then we have the open closing brackets. The property that we are interested in changing is the background dash color. And then we want to set that to RGB with the 0, 0, and that should set it to black. All right, and that's all it's wanting us to do for this step here. Let's go ahead and check our code. We got the congratulations. We're moving on to the next one. We're in step number 22 of building a set of colored markers. It says in here that a function is a piece of the code that takes an input and performs a specific action. The CSS RGB function accepts values and therefore the arguments of red, green, and blue respectively. So when we're looking at our code that we did up here for the container, it's saying, hey, I want 0% of this to be red, I want 0% of this to be green, 0% of this to be blue. And in here, it tells us that our number ranges go from 0 all the way to 255. And 0 means that there's 0% of that color, which equates to black. And 255 means that, hey, 100% of red is going to go in there. Now, on the one class CSS rule, we want to replace the keyword of red, and we want to utilize RGB function. And for this, we want the 255 value to be applied to the red section, and then we want zeros for the green and the blue. So let's go ahead and go through that part right here. So we're going to do RGB, and then we want that left and right parenthesis, and we want 255 to show full red. We want 0 for the blue and the green. We're going to do that, and we get our red color back. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next. All right, in step number 23 with building a set of colored markers, we're going to do the exact same thing, it looks like, to our class identifiers of 2 and 3, but this time we're going to be shifting the numbers over. Instead of, if we look up here at this very first one, we maxed out the red. So with step number 2, we want to lower the red all the way to 0. We want to max out the green, and then we want to make sure that we have a 0 for the blue part. Just going to highlight this. We're going to do the RGB, and then we're going to do 0, comma, 255, comma, 0. And notice that we do get our green, and then we're going to do the exact same thing for our blue. Let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to do RGB, we're going to 0 out the red, we're going to 0 out the green, and then we're going to max out the blue. So now we have our colors with the RGB. Let's go ahead and check our results. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next one. Step number 24 of the freeCodeCamp, building a set of colored markers. It says on here that while the red and blue markers, they look the same the way that we had them before, but the green one looks a lot lighter. And so in our to CSS rule, it says, let's go ahead and set that RGB function. Let's go ahead and change that to 127 instead of the 255. So let's do that, 127, and we should get that darker colored green there. So we don't want to max that one out, I guess. We want to lower it down, but still keep the zeros on both the red and the blue. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next one. This is step number 25, and what it's asking us to do on this, it says in the container CSS rule, use the shorthand padding property. So just like the margin property that we added before, and that was over here on our marker, right? We're able to target the top, bottom, left, and right with two properties here of 10 pixels and auto. So 10 pixels top and bottom, the auto is left and right. And so that's the way that this is going to work for this one here. It says that let's go ahead and make our padding. Let's add 10 pixels to the top and bottom, and then we're going to do padding left and right. We're going to set that to 0. Here we're going to do padding, and the top portion here, top and bottom, is going to get 10 pixels. Okay. And then we want to not apply that all the way around. This part right here with just one property, it does it to all of the edges there. And if we add a secondary property, and this is going to be 0, and you don't have to put the pixels on there, by the way. This is just going to apply to the top and bottom and has no effect whatsoever with the left and right. So let's go ahead and check our code. We got the congratulations. We're moving on to the next one. Step number 26 with freeCodeCamp's building a set of colored markers. It's going to have us go back to the number 2 CSS rule and change this back to 255. Again, I don't know why it had us change it before, but let's put it back to 255. Let's check our code. Congratulations. 26 complete. Step number 27 of building a set of colored markers for freeCodeCamp. It says here, On this RGB function for the container, go ahead and set the red, green, and blue values and max them out to 255. So if all zeros give us black, we could imagine that 255 and adding 255 to the next one. And then we come in here and do another 255, so that we're going to get white. So now we're back to the white color. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next one. All right, step number 28 of building a set of colored markers with freeCodeCamp. It says here that secondary colors are colors that you get when you combine the primary colors. And you might have noticed when we were adding those values in the last step that we did get something interesting when we did full red and full green. We ended up getting the yellow. So let's go ahead, it says on here, let's go ahead and do pure red and pure green, mix them together and see what we get here. So we're going to do 255 for this one. And there's our yellow. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. On to the next. Step number 29 with the freeCodeCamp, building a set of colored markers. It's letting us know that on to class, it wants us to maximize not only the green, but the blue as well. And so remember, RGB, the B is that last value here. And so we want to set this to 255. And it looks like we get a nice cyan color with mixing those two. All right, let's go ahead and check our code, make sure we did it right. Congratulations. Let's go ahead and move on. So step number 30 is just a repeat of the process. It looks like go ahead and create the final color, which is magenta. We're going to maximize the value of blue and also maximize the value of red. So for this, we're just going to put 255 right here. We're going to check our code, and there we go. Congratulations. On to the next step. Step number 31 says that we're going to be creating tertiary colors. So this is by combining the primary color with a nearby secondary color. And we're going to keep the 255 for the red, but we're going to change the green one down to 127. So let's go ahead and apply that. And there we go. We got orange. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. Let's go to the next step here. Step 32, we're going to do the same exact thing. It looks like we are going to adjust the blue here to 127. And let's check our code on it. There we go. Moving on to the next. Step number 33 of building the set of colored markers. It's going to have us adjust the red and change that to 127. And there we go. We get the violet. And let's go ahead and check our code for it. Congratulations. Moving on to the next. Step number 34 is having us do some more work with our RGBs. And so it says we're going to be creating chartreuse, azure, and also rose. And so what we're going to do here, it says for the chartreuse green, go ahead and update the function so that the rule of red is 127 and then set the max value of green. The red is now going to be 127 and then the green portion is going to be maxed out at the 255. And then we're going to do the same thing for this one. We're going to do 255 here, then we're going to do the 127 here. And we're basically just flip-flopping these. 127 to get the other tertiary colors based upon mixing the secondary colors. Okay, let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next one. All right, step number 35 in building a set of colored markers for freeCodeCamp. It says that now that we've gone through all the primary, secondary, and tertiary colors, let's go ahead and set all these back to pure black. In order to get the pure black, those are all going to be zeros. Let's go ahead and zero each and every single one of these out. So let me go ahead and do that. All right, they're all zero. Let's go and check our code. Congratulations. Moving on to the next. All right, we are on step number 36 of building a set of colored markers for freeCodeCamp. And I don't know about you, but I am getting tired of changing these markers colors to fit these steps here. So it says on this very first one, let the first one be full red. So max out the red value. So that's going to be 255 for it. Next, it says, hey, on the part 2 here, we want to have cyan, and we're going to max out both the blue and the green. So come down here, we're going to max out the green. We're also going to max out the blue. And so that will give us our cyan. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. Hopefully that's the last time we're changing these. Moving on. Step number 37. It says on here that notice that the red and the cyan colors are very bright next to each other. In contrast, it is very distracting and can be overused on a website. And can make text hard to read if placed on a complementary color background. So it's better to place one of these colors and make them a dominant color to use, and use a complementary color as an accent to bring attention to a certain content on the page. So first, on the H1 rule, let's go ahead and utilize the RGB function to set the background color to cyan. So we already have a working example of this. I'm just going to go ahead and find it. I'm going to copy and paste it here. So we got the background color here. It did specify that we have to use RGB because cyan is actually a key word, believe it or not. So now we can go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. Let's move on to the next. Step number 38 with the building set of colored markers. It's asking us, utilizing the class of .1 rule, use the RGB function, set the background color to black. And then we're going to do the number 2 CSS rule, the RGB, set that color to red. Again, we are changing these colors back and forth, and I have no idea why. So we're going to change this one here to 255 to max out the red, and then we're going to zero out these other ones here. So let me go ahead and delete it and make that a 0. And now we can go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're ready for the next color change, I bet. Step number 39. Notice how your eyes are naturally drawn to the red color as it is the center, right? In designing a site, this can be useful for drawing attention to important things like buttons and links. There are several other important combinations outside of complementary colors that you'll learn that a little bit later. For now, let's change it back to black. All right, I guess now my eyes are noticing and my brain's also noticing that we're doing a lot of repetitive work, and it's hopefully going to change here in the future. But let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next one. Step number 40 has us remove our very cool 1980s looking style of background color. So let's go ahead and get rid of it and check our code. Congratulations, on to the next step. Step number 41 in building a set of colored markers for FreeCodeCamp. It's telling us, hey, no longer are we going to use 1, 2, and 3. Maybe we're just going to be utilizing the name of the colored marker that we would like to have. In this case here, it's going to be red. Let's go ahead and check our code. Perfect. Moving on to the next one. Step 42 of building a set of colored markers for FreeCodeCamp. It's telling us that we need to update the 1 CSS rule and change it to red. So this right here is originally going for the 1. We're going to change this to only deal with the red. And notice that we got our box to pop right back up with that color that's there. Let's check our code. Moving on to the next. So it says in step 43, go ahead and update the RGB function for the CSS rule for the red and max it out. So again, we've seen this before. We're going to do 255, and that will give us our red. Let's go ahead and check our code. Awesome. Moving on to the next here. Now it says go ahead and change 2 to green, and then we're also going to change 3 to blue. So I'm going to go ahead and change this here to green. Of course, we're going to lose our color over there on the far right, and we want this one to be blue. Let me go ahead and check our code. Great. Let's move on to the next. Now, step 45, with the building the set of colored markers with FreeCodeCamp, it tells us that let's go ahead and update the 2. That should now be the green class. Okay, so this is going to be green. And notice we got our little rectangle back up. And let's go ahead and get rid of the 3 here and change that to blue. All right, we got all of our rectangles back. Let's check our code. Congratulations, we're ready to move on to the next. All right, we are in step number 46 with building a set of colored markers, and inside of this FreeCodeCamp lesson, it says A very common way to apply color to an element with CSS is to utilize a hexadecimal value, or we call it usually a hex value. So that's true. Now, hex values, they start with the hashtag. So that's what we're going to want to make sure that we use first. And we want to follow that with 6 characters. Now, the characters can be anywhere from the range of 0 through 9 or A through F. And the first pair of characters represent the red, the second pair represent the green, the third pair represent the blue. And so, for example, it gives us hex code example right there, and that is going to represent blue. Now, when we're talking about this class right here, the green, it says that we would like to utilize 00, FF, and 00. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And the thing that you want to make sure that you remember whenever we're talking about the hex code is it gets that hashtag there first. And so it wants 00FF00, and then make sure that we do the semicolon at the end. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, your code passes. Moving on to the next. Let's go. Step number 47 with building a set of colored markers. It's teaching us about hex values here, and it says that we may already be familiar with decimals, and that's what we use in our math, right? We have base 10, which goes from 0 to 9. Now, hexadecimal utilizes base 16. And so once you get to the 9, you run out of numbers, and you're going to have to utilize letters in order to get you to have more values with the 16 base. So it says with hex colors, 00, that stands for 0% of that color. FF is the max of that color. And so if we look at what we did before with the 00, FF 00, that translates to 0% red, 100% green, and 0% blue. And that's the same as what we did before with the 0, 255, and 0. So it says, let's go ahead and lower the intensity of the green and get the value of that hex color here to 7F, F as in foxtrot. So I'm just going to come in here, delete that 1F, change it to this, and now we have a deeper green value than we did before. So let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. Let's move on to the next. All right, so we are on step number 48 with the freeCodeCamp's teachings of building a set of colored markers. And man, we are learning so much about colors now. It says in here that the HSL model, or known as hue, saturation, and lightness, is another way to represent colors. The CSS HSL function accepts 3 values, and those numbers go from 0 all the way up to 360 for the hue. And then a percentage of 0 to 100 for the saturation, and 0 to 100 for the lightness. So if you could imagine a color wheel with the hue of red, and red is 0 degrees, green is 120 degrees, and blue is 240 degrees. The saturation is the intensity of the color, 0% for gray, 100% for the pure color that comes through. So you can add the percent sign to the saturation and lightness values. So it says on here, lightness is how bright a color appears from the 0% or complete black, while 100% is pure white, 50% being neutral. So in the blue CSS rule, let's go ahead and add a CSS function to change the background color. Set the hue to 240, set the saturation to 100%, and set the lightness to 50%. So what it's looking for here is, instead of RGB, we're going to do the HSL, left parenthesis, right parenthesis. And so for the first value, it wants us to do 240. The next value is 100%. And then the last value is 50%. And there our blue is back. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next. All right, we are in step number 49. Now it says on here, we've learned a few ways to go ahead and set colors with CSS. And we can also use color transition or color gradient on an element. Now, a gradient is which one of those color transitions to another. So we have something here called a linear gradient function that allows us to control the direction of the gradient line, whether we want it to be like horizontal or diagonal, right, or up and down. And with the linear gradient functionality, you can actually create an image element that is usually paired with a background property, which can accept an image value. So it says in here, in the red CSS rule, go and change the background color property to just background. And that's where we're probably going to be applying the gradient here, probably in the next step. So we're just going to change this to background. Let's go ahead and check our code. Again, it doesn't do any difference for us, but by having the background property itself, it will allow us to have more flexibility with what we put inside here for the value. So let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next one. All right, we are on step number 50, the linear gradient function. Very flexible, and here's a basic syntax. Now, two things that I want to tell you on this one is these instructions for this, very frustrating when I'm trying to go through this and I'm trying to use the example code that you give me with the gradient and gradient direction. So anyways, the second part is this thing scrolls over so we can see a little bit more information about it. So it says on here that we can take advantage of the linear gradient. It takes the gradient direction and then we supply it with two colors. The two colors, it says that we can use hex, we can use RGB, we can use the color keywords, we can use HSL in order to identify with these two colors. And it says now we're going to apply the red to green gradient along the 90-degree line. So to me, this wanted me to build it out completely, and apparently it just wants you to go at it step by step here. And so this is the frustrating part. It wants us to remove the red that we've already know and have written in here to do something like this. It says go ahead and add the property value here to this of linear gradient. And it wants the left and right parentheses, and then it wants the 90 DEG on there. It doesn't want anything else. It doesn't want any other color, even though this is not a valid CSS solution as far as this step goes. This is where we can go ahead and check this out, and then we get the congratulations and move on. So as of right now, this doesn't do anything. It actually removed our color that we had on there, but I'm assuming red to green will be applied in the next couple steps. Let's go ahead and find out. All right, moving on to the next. All right, we are on step number 51 of the freeCodeCamp, building a set of colored markers. And now it wants us to add back in our pure red. Again, we just deleted it. I don't know why we couldn't combine a couple steps with this one, but it wants the RGB function, and we want to max out the red. We want to lower the other ones. And let's go ahead and check our work here. And there we go. The code passes. Now, again, we're not going to see anything because we need the other color to mix in here to do that gradient. All right, on to the next step. Step number 52 of building a set of colored markers with freeCodeCamp. And this is exactly what I was telling you before. We won't see any gradient in there because our linear gradient function needs to have two color arguments at least to work. And so in this same linear gradient function, let's go ahead and use the RGB function and set the second color to pure green. After the RGB value, and we're going to go ahead and add a comma in here for the next argument. And this one is going to be the pure green, which is maxing out the green portion of our RGB. So RGB, we're going to do 0, 255, 0. And now we see a gradient on here. It looks like a Jolly Rancher maybe, but we do get that gradient. Let's go ahead and check our code. There we go. Looks good. All right, we are on step number 53 of the freeCodeCamp's building a set of colored markers. And in here it says, as you can see, the linear gradient function produced a nice smooth from red to green gradient. While the linear gradient function needs a minimum of 2 arguments, it can work with multiple arguments. So go ahead and add a pure blue as the third argument. So we're going to come over here, and right before the final parenthesis, we're going to add another comma, and we're going to do RGB, and we want this to be full blue. So we're doing 0, 0, and then 255 for the blue. And now we get very similar to a little bit of a rainbow, right? So anyways, let's go ahead and check our work here. And it says we're good to go. All right, moving on to the next. Step 54 of the building a set of colored markers for freeCodeCamp. We're looking at color stops. And what this is telling us is that we're able to use things such as pixels or even percentages following a certain color, that will stop the color at a certain point. And so in this example here, it gave a linear gradient 90 degrees. And then it says, hey, out of that whole block element, we want to cover red all the way to 90%, and then the rest be black. Well, in here, what it wants us to do is add 75% to the color stop of red. So we're going to come down here for the red, and then we're going to add in the 75%. And notice that the red marker here, it's now taking up 75% of the available space and leaving the rest of the gradient to be moved on from the 75 all the way to the 100. That's what that part does. Let's go ahead and double check our code, make sure that it's what it wanted. There we go. Moving on to the next one. All right, we are on step number 55 in building a set of colored markers for freeCodeCamp. And it tells us on here that now we know a little bit more about the basics of linear gradient and color stops. Let's go ahead and change the linear gradient on this to be 180 degrees. So that's why we're going to come over here. We're going to change this 90 to 180. So I'm just going to delete that, put in 180, and let's check our work. All right, congratulations. And our marker's not looking like a marker anymore, but let's move on to the next. We're on step 56 now of building a set of colored markers, and now it's telling us to adjust some of the start and stop points. And so we're going to stop this one here. It says add a stop to this and say it's going to be 0%. The next one, it says it wants the green set to 50%. So 50%. And then the last one here, and we got word wrap over here. We want to set this one here to 100%. So we'll do 100% and put a little space in there for readability. Okay, let's see if that's what they wanted. And there we go. Moving on to the next step. All right, we are on step number 57. And this is what it's asking us to do. It says for the very first color argument, which is this red one that you see right here, this is going to be our focus. These are the values that we're changing here. So we want the red to be 122. We want the green here to be 74. And then we want this last one here to be 14. Okay, so let's go ahead and check our code. There we go. We got the congratulations. We're moving on to the next one. So it just wanted us to focus on the very first color, not the secondary or the third. Okay, we're on step number 58 here, and it says that now we can modify the second color argument, which is this one right here. And it would like us to modify the RGB function values to read as following: 245, 62, and 113. So we're going to do 245, and then we're going to do 62. And then the last one here is 113. Let's go ahead and check this. There we go. Congratulations. Moving on to the next. Step number 59 of building a set of colored markers with freeCodeCamp. We're looking at modifying the third argument, which is the one right now that is pure blue. And we want to update the following values on it. So we want 162, 27, and 27. And I'll make this a little more readable on our screens. I'm just going to hit the Enter key, and that shoved it to the next line. And that way we can just see these values here a little clearer. So I'm just going to go ahead and do 162. Next is 27, and then 27. So 27, and then 27. All right, let's go ahead and check our code. There we go. We're ready to move on to the next one. So building a set in the colored markers with freeCodeCamp, what we're looking at here in step number 60 is, it says we now know what the red marker kind of looks like. Let's go ahead and apply the same sort of techniques to the green one. Now, there's a caveat with this one, is that we only want to do whatever the step is telling us to do, and we don't want to go full-blown off the grid here. So let's just do exactly what it says. So in the green CSS rule, let's change background color property to background. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete the color and the hyphen. Let's go ahead and check our code. And that's what it wants. It doesn't want us to fill out the entire thing, just like what we had before. That looks good. Let's move on to the next step. So step number 61 in building a set of colored markers for freeCodeCamp, we're looking at adding the linear gradient to this now. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And it says that we want to utilize the linear gradient, but we want to apply the 180 degree, just like what we did before. So linear gradient. And we want to put in the 180 degree. And then it says on here, we just want to apply the very first color argument. And we're going to utilize hex code for this. And that's going to be something a little bit different than what we did with RGB. And so it wants the hashtag here, and it wants 55, 68, and then it wants the 0D. Okay. And that's going to give us our green. And remember, we're not going to see anything on here because it requires a minimum of 2 colors here for the gradient to work. So let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next one. All right, so for the second color argument, we're going to utilize, again, we're still utilizing hex code coloring. And so we're going to put a comma here, and we're going to add the hex code of 71, F as in foxtrot, and then 5, and then 3, and then the echo, E for echo. And now we have our gradient, and I'm sure we're going to add one more color, just like we did last time, and then maybe some color stops to make it look like the first marker. Okay, so let's check our code. There we go. Let's move on to the next one. So step number 63 with building a set of colored markers. What we're looking at is adding our very last color with this. And so we're going to go ahead and add a comma here. And once we do, we're going to utilize that hex code, and we're going to do 11, and then we're going to do 6, C as in Charlie, and then 31. And that should give us our last and final color. Let's go ahead and click on the button to check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next one. In step 64 with building a set of colored markers, what we're looking at here is just some code cleanup. Again, interesting that freeCodeCamp wants to do this, but we are removing the color stops here. Again, I don't know why they had us put it in there in the first place if we're just going to remove it. And they could have just told us that it naturally will split it up like this without us doing it. So anyway, let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next one. We're in step number 65 and building a set of colored markers. Now this one is another code cleanup. So by default, it will go ahead and do a gradient from top to bottom. And that 180 degrees is saying that, hey, it is already like that. So we could totally omit it. So we're going to go ahead and delete this, and it should look no different. Same thing down here. It should look no different. Now, because I have some spaces, I don't know if its test will work, but it looks like it did. And there we go. Let's move on to the next one. Step number 66 with building a set of colored markers with freeCodeCamp. So now that we're done with the red and the green, now it's time to do the blue, but this time we're still going to rock with the HSL rather than the hex code. So it says on the very first one, let's go ahead and change that background color to just background as far as that property goes. So here we go. Just removed it. Let's check our code. Congratulations. On to the next one. So steps 67 with the freeCodeCamp lesson here of building a set of colored markers. We're going to add the linear gradient to this for the functionality. So let's do linear gradient. So I'm going to grab it from up here and just paste it. Now, once we do this, it does want us to adjust the values in here. And so for the very first one, it wants 186. And then for the percentages, we want this to be 76%. And then we want 16% there. Okay. All right, again, we're not going to see anything over here. We need two colors in order to make a linear gradient to work. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next. So step number 68 with freeCodeCamp at building a set of colored markers, we're looking at adding the second color argument on here. Again, we're still dealing with the HSL function. So I'm just going to come to the end of this. I'm going to put a comma in here. We're going to do the HSL. And then it wants us to do 223. And then we're going to do the 90%. And then we want the 60%. And let's see if that works here. All right, and so there we are. We got the two colors in there. Let's go and check our code. There we go. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next. All right, step number 69. It says on here that let's go ahead and add that third argument in here for that HSL. We want the 240 as far as the hue goes, 56 for the saturation, and then 42 for the lightness. And that's all going to go right here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a comma. And then let's go ahead. went ahead and pasted what was here earlier, but I'm just going to change the values of this. So I'm going to do 240. It says it wants 56%. And then over here, it says for this part here, we want it to be 42% for the lightness. And there we go. That looks great. That looks like what we want for our markers. Check the code. Congratulations. They're done. Right, step number 70 with freeCodeCamp's building a set of colored markers. What we're looking at here, it says, now that the markers have the correct colors on them, it's time to build the marker sleeves. And let's go ahead and start with the red marker. So inside the red marker, it says, let's go ahead and add another div. And again, I'm putting the closing tags on there. And then we want to give it a class name here of sleeve. All right, so that looks good. Let's check our code. There we go. Again, we're not going to see anything until we add some styling. So I'm assuming we're going to the CSS next. Step number 71 with freeCodeCamp's building a set of color markers. It tells us that we're going to go ahead and create a new CSS rule here for the sleeve. And again, we made it a class. So it's .sleeve. And we want it in there with the following properties. Width to be 110 pixels. And then we want to follow that up with the height. And we want to set that to 25 pixels. All right, let's go ahead and check our code here. Cool. All right. We're not going to see anything until we apply some color to it. Step number 72 has us create the background color of white. So let's go ahead and do that. Background color. And we want to set that to white. Okay. You can see it is totally taking up the first left-hand portion of that element up to 110 pixels. So let's see how we're going to fix this. Check our code first. There we go. Moving on to the next. All right, we are on step number 73 with freeCodeCamp's CSS, building a set of colored markers. And in this one, we're talking about opacity. Opacity allows us to see through something. And by default, everything is set at 100% opacity, meaning that you see that white just shine on through. You don't see anything that's underneath it. And what it's going to have us do here is set the opacity to 0.5, which is 50%. Visually, we're going to see a little bit of that marker come through. And so let's go ahead and try this out. So it's opacity, and we want to set that to 0.5 and put a semicolon on there. So as you can see, it looks like a little clear piece of tape that we just put on there. And I'm sure we're going to be shifting it over to be more towards the middle and the follow-up steps. So let's go and check our code. There we go. Congratulations. Moving on to the next. So we're on step number 74 with building a set of colored markers. And it says that there's another way to set opacity is utilizing an alpha channel. So this step right here is really just wanting us to remove what we just did. So I'm going to come down here and let's go ahead and remove the opacity. And let's go ahead and check our code. And then it's going to show us how to do the alpha. So let's go ahead and move on to it. So step number 75 with the building a set of colored markers for freeCodeCamp, it's telling us that in order to use the alpha value of this, we need to put it as one of the very last arguments or parameters on the RGBA function. Okay, we've used RGB This one's A, so that's going to be a significant difference between the previous lessons that we've learned. Now, the alpha value, it says it can go anywhere from 0, which is full transparency, to 1, which is full on solid, right? Where you can't see through it. So it says that you can also do this with the HSL as well as hex colors, and you'll see that here very soon. So inside the sleeve, we want to go ahead and remove this part here. And it says set the background color property to pure white. So we don't want to use the keyword anymore. And we want to utilize A and full white. And if you remember 000, that gave us black. And the 255, 255 does give us the pure white. And then it says it wants 50% opacity on this. And so we have to add one more comma, and it's going to be 0.5. And that will give us the transparent portion of this. So let's go ahead and check our code. There we go. Congratulations. We're going on to the next one. Right, so it says that it would be really nice if we could shove that white wrapper a little bit to the right. And what it wants us to do is create a new div here with the class name of cap. So we're going to do the div, and I'm going to close it off. And then I'm going to come back over here and add the class. And we're going to set that to cap. All right. Again, we're not going to visually see anything. Nothing's going to be shifted over quite yet. We have to do all that with the CSS, because if there's nothing in between the div, it thinks that nothing should be there. So we have to define some parameters. Let's go and check our code. That looks great. Moving on to the next. Step number 77 with the building a set of colored markers. It says that let's go ahead and create a new CSS rule. We're going to target the class of cap. And with that new rule, let's go ahead and set the width property to 60 pixels. And then we're going to do the height to 25 pixels. So again, classes are periods. So we're going to do cap. And then we want the width to be 60 pixels. And then we want the height, we want that to be 25 pixels. Okay. All right. And let's go ahead and check our code here. All right. Congratulations. We're on to the next. Step number 78 with freeCodeCamp's building a set of colored markers. This one might be a little bit tricky because we haven't seen it in a long time. And this is where we're going to be targeting two elements at the same time, or two classes at the same time. And we want to change our display type to be inline block. So remember, anytime we're utilizing a div inside of an HTML, we call that a block element. And the white wrapper, it just went to the next line. Anyways, in order to get these things back and be aligned together as a brick, if you're laying bricks, we need to tell it that, hey, let's make these displays an inline block. For this, create a new CSS property here, and we're going to go ahead and target the cap. And then we also want to target the sleeve, okay? But we want to make sure that we put a period on both of these here. And then we're going to do the curly bracket, and then we want the display to be inline block. And that should shove our cap right here. And then we have our sleeve. So now they're all on one line. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next. 83% done. So in step number 79 with the freeCodeCamp building a set of colored markers, it's saying that in the last project we learned a little bit about the border color property. And in this case here, typically borders are set to none by default. And with CSS, we can control all aspects of a border, to be honest with you. And we can target all the sides, or we can target just one side. And so for the border to be visible, we need to give it a width and a style. So we want to add a new property to our sleeve, and we're going to call this one border left width. And we want to set that to 10 pixels. So border, okay. And then we want to change this to 10 pixels and hit the semicolon there. And let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Step number 80 of the building a set of colored markers. Now, this time it wants us to go ahead and apply a style. So not only do we have to provide a width, but we have to provide a style. And this is going to be the border left style, and we're going to set it to be solid. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and copy this here, and I'm going to put it on the next line, and we want this to be solid. Okay. So we got a nice little border on the left side of our sleeve, and it's starting to look like a marker or a marker cap, right? So let's go ahead and check our code. There we go. We're moving on to the next. All right, in step number 81 of freeCodeCamp's building a set of colored markers, it says that the border should now be visible. We can see it. Now, by default, our color is black, but it wants us to make our code more readable. So let's go ahead and specify that the border color is black. So I'm just going to come down here, and then I'm going to paste it down here. And let's go ahead and change this to black. All right, let's go ahead and check our code. Again, nothing should change. That looks good. Moving on to the next. All right, so step number 82 with freeCodeCamp's building a set of colored markers. It's telling us here that, you know what? We know that you just got done writing these 3 cool steps, but it can all be summed up with one property for the shorthand, and it's just called border left. So it wants us to remove this part here, and it wants us to simply do the border left, and it wants us to supply the width, and again, I believe that was 10 pixels, solid, and then black is what it's wanting. And let's go ahead and check our code here. Congratulations. So again, just cleaning up some properties, making it a one-liner instead of having 3 separate properties. Let's move on to the next one. Step 83 with freeCodeCamp's building a set of colored markers. It says that, hey, it's looking really good, but let's make it even more realistic by adding a double line border on this. And so it says change the solid to double. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's go ahead and check our work. And notice that we do get that double lined feature on our marker. All right. Congratulations. Moving on to the next. Step number 84 with freeCodeCamp's building a set of colored markers. It tells us here that the black color on the border looks really harsh against the more transparent sleeve. Let's go ahead and change the opacity on this. And the way that we're going to go about it is, again, pure black. It wants us to do A. So let's get rid of the black and do RGB, call the function here. And then we want pure black, which is 0, 0, 0. And then it wants the opacity of that to be 75. So there we go. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. Moving on to the next. All right, step number 85 of building a set of colored markers with freeCodeCamp. It says on here that we would like to go ahead and apply the same type of divs to the other markers. And so I'm just going to copy these, and then I'm going to come down here to the marker green. I'm going to go ahead and paste. And notice that the CSS is already being applied to them, which is really nice. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the blue. All right, perfect. Those look really good. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next. Step number 86 with freeCodeCamp, building a set of colored markers. It says one of the last things that you'll want to do is add a slight little shadow to each marker to make them a little more realistic. So we're going to be applying this to each marker. And here is the example property. And we get an X offset and a Y offset and then a color. Notice that there's no commas separating each one of these. And so we're going to come down here, and it wants a 5 pixel and then a 5 pixel, and then the color is going to be red. Okay. Now it does go in here and talk to you a little bit about it accepts numbers in here in the value of pixels. Okay. So just because we type the number 5, it's not enough. We need to make sure that we're utilizing pixels. Now a positive number moves that shadow to the right, and a negative moves it left. And then the Y, if it is positive, it moves the shadow down. Okay, so just to reread that there for you. All right, so with this being said, we're going to go ahead and do the box shadow, and we want this to be 5 pixels by 5 pixels, and then we want this to be red in color. All right, so it doesn't look too pretty right now, but I'm sure it's going to look a little nicer. But that's all it wanted us to do for now. We got the congratulations. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so step number 87 is saying you've noticed that the shadow went 5 pixels to the right and then 5 pixels down. That's why we see it right here. Then it says, let's go ahead and do a negative offset. And so we're just going to do -5 on each one of these. So I'm going to go ahead and do a minus here and a minus here. And notice how it shifted it up and to the left. And let's check our code. Congratulations. Moving on to the next. Step number 88 of freeCodeCamp's building a set of colored markers. It says on here, notice that those edges on our red one are very sharp. And that is very true. And it says that we can add an optional blur radius. So take a look at the example code here. Box shadow. We're going to do an offset, a blur radius, then a color. We're just going to add one more thing to this. In our green, we're going to do the box shadow. And the offset here, they want us to do 5 pixels by 5 pixels. And then it wants the blur radius on here to be 5 pixels also. And we want it to be the color of green, okay? So you can see on this one, if you're able to zoom in on it, it looks a little hazy around that green. So let's go ahead and check the code, make sure it's what they want. Perfect. Looks good. Moving on to the next. All right, so now we're on step number 89 of the freeCodeCamp, building a set of color markers, and we're on the blue marker this time. And it's introducing us to another optional value, which is the spread radius. So it goes offset, blur radius, spread radius. And for this one, it is wanting us to do zeros. And remember from our very first one that if it's a 0, you don't need to put pixels on there. It already knows it by default. Let's go ahead and go with it. So we want box shadow, and we want to set it to 0, 0, 0. And then the very last one here is 5 pixels. And then we want to set it, the color to be blue, right? And let's go ahead and check our code. And we got the congratulations. We're moving on to the next one. So step number 90 in the freeCodeCamp, building a set of color markers. It says on here, now that we're familiar with the box shadow, let's go ahead and finalize these shadows instead of playing around with them. And it says in the red CSS rules, let's go ahead and update the values of them. The offset of the X is going to be 0, offset of the Y is 0, blur radius is going to be 20 pixels, and then the spread is 0. Again, I don't know if we're going to omit some of these, but let's go ahead and do what it said. The very first offset is 0, then the other one is 0 for the Y. The blur radius is 20 pixels, and the spread radius is 0. So I'm just going to go ahead and check the code here, and congratulations. All right, moving on to the next. I'm sure we're going to do this to the green and the blue and come back and change a few more properties of this. Let's keep this thing going. Step number 91, let's update the color value of the red markers, box shadow, and let's do an RGBA, okay? So I'm gonna get rid of the red, and we're gonna do RGBA, and then we want it to be 14, and I didn't read that first part, so we're going to do 83 at the beginning. So it's 83, 14, 14, and then we want the alpha to be 0.8. All right, let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next. Step number 92, we're almost done. And with the shadows here, let's go ahead and it talks about doing the same thing to the blue and the green. We're going to worry about the colors a little bit later. But we're just doing this to match the red as far as the box shadows go. So we're going to do 0, 0, and then we're going to do the 20 pixels, and then a 0. And it says go ahead and keep it with the green. And then we're going to do the same thing for the blue. So let me go ahead and update it. All right, perfect. And let's check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next. This is step number 93 with freeCodeCamp's building a set of colored markers. It says for the green marker, box shadow property, replace the named color, which is the green that we see right here, with the values of 3B, 7E as an echo, and then for the blue. And then as far as the alpha channel, let's go ahead and use CC. All right, so let's go ahead and do it. So with this being said, let's get rid of the green. And then we're going to do the hashtag here. And let's go ahead and do 3B, 7E, 20, and then a CC. And then let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next. All right, we are on step number 94. I believe this is the last one here. It says for the blue marker with the box shadow, let's go ahead and replace the named color with the HSLA. And the blue here, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of it. Now we still need that zeros and the 20 pixels and that final trailing 0 with this. And we want HA, and then we want to make that into a function. As far as the first argument, we want 223. That's going to be for the hue, 59% for the saturation, and then we want to put a comma on there. 31 for the lightness, so 31. And then the last part here is the alpha. That's going to be 0.8, and that looks good. Let's go ahead and check our code. Perfect. We are finished. So hopefully you got through this lesson okay. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Make sure that you like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Okay?